What is up, y'all? Welcome on back to another review. Fantastic Four, the first steps comes out next week. So I felt like this was a good time to go back and check out the first three Fantastic Four films. And first up, we have the first Fantastic Four movie, the one from 2005. It is a movie that I think if you ask anybody on this earth, just like what are some of the worst superhero Marvel movies ever made, I think Fantastic Four tends to take the cake on some of the worst movies ever made. And I'm here to tell you I have a little bit different of an opinion on the 2005 movie and Rise of the Silver Surfer. But today we will discuss 2005 OG Fantastic Four film. It is a movie that, look, I'm not going to sit here and say that it is one of the best movies of all time. It's not. I'm not even going to say that it is a great movie. In fact, I will sit here and tell you that it is not a good movie. It is a movie that is not made particularly well. It is an enjoyable movie, if anything. So just hear me out on everything that I have to say about the OG film. And then next week, I will be discussing Rise of Silver Surfer, which I'm just go ahead and just pre-warn you. I might end up glazing that one a little bit because I think that if anything, it is an enjoyable time just chillaxing and watching a superhero movie, despite the fact that it is not well made. And then don't even get me started on Fan Four Stick. Just look, we're going to say that for that review, okay? But the OG 2005 one, look, I watched this a couple years ago for the first time in several years. And I thought to myself, wow, this one is actually not bad. It's not bad at all. I think watching it from then till now, I think I'm a little bit cooler on the movie than I was a couple years ago when I ended up watching all three of these movies back to back. I believe that this is probably, if I had to guess off the top of my head, this is probably the better made film out of the two that came out in the early 2000s. And off the top of my head, I'd be willing to say, without having watched Rise of the Silver Surfer in quite a while, I'd be willing to say that this is probably the least entertaining one out of the two. So there's several things that we have to discuss about this particular version of the Fantastic Four. First off, I think this movie is a product of its time. It came out in 2005, the early 2000s. The superhero genre was just kicking up. We have X-Men, Spider-Man, we have all these superhero properties that are coming to theaters. And I think just it's a completely different era of superhero films that were made then. I know I have my problems with superhero films nowadays, but back then we didn't have the technology, we didn't have the CGI. We had to basically, for half the movie, it was them getting their suit, and they wouldn't get their suit until like the last 5 minutes of the movie, and that was the climactic battle, and that was the one action set piece that you would get in just about all of these superhero movies. And Fantastic Four from 2005 is no different. There are, I think, two action set pieces that I can remember off the top of my head. There's the one on the bridge, which is I don't remember it being that long, but it is actually a fairly long action set piece. It is, for all intents and purposes, it is decent, but it could have been completely avoidable. Like the entire sequence was because the Thing tried to save some dude from killing himself, and he ended up it just snowballed from there to where basically a fire truck was coming off the bridge, cars were plummeting into each other, and everything was catching on fire. There was an oxygen truck that exploded. Just if there was anything that could go wrong on that bridge, it went wrong on that bridge. If the Thing just wouldn't have basically forced that dude off of the railing and then having him cause the entire wreck, like that could have been completely avoided. But despite all that, I think it is a decent set piece that kind of showcases all of their powers. And outside of that sequence, we only have one other, and that was the very end. And that's just based on my memory. I could be wrong. The ending with the fight with Doctor Doom, not as exciting as that set piece on the bridge. But again, you got to look at it from the lens of when did this movie come out? In 2005. Like nowadays, if this movie took place and it came out in 2025, we would be looking at that and saying, wow, this is a supremely boring movie when it comes to the action. This is stuff that we have seen before. Yeah, but well, back then we didn't have any of this, and it was super expensive to have, 4 or 5 action set pieces throughout an entire movie, where now it's just commonplace in every single action movie that you have multiple of those action sequences. But compare the bridge scene to the very end where they're fighting Doctor Doom, and that Doctor Doom scene is just so boring. I think it's a lot longer than I remember it to be. Shout out to that. But in terms of just showcasing their powers and there being some type of tension and you thinking that the villain might win at the end of the day, there's none of that tension there. You're never on the edge of your seat when that sequence is going on. So the whole ending just feels a little anticlimactic. But that's really the movie itself and when it came out. So yeah, you can't really criticize the action too much because it's just really a product of its time. But let's talk about the superpowers and the Fantastic Four themselves, because honestly, that is why you go to this movie or any of these movies, are the superheroes. The characters themselves, how do they operate with each other? How are their relationships with each other? I'm not gonna lie, I enjoy this iteration of the Fantastic Four. I dig Jessica Alba as Sue Storm. I dig Michael Chiklis as Ben Grimm and Gruffudd as Mr. Fantastic, probably saying his name wrong, but whatever. Chris Evans as Human Torch. I enjoy these actors and their iterations of these characters. I think they're fun. I think they're enjoyable. For the most part, we have some development of these relationships and these characters throughout the runtime that, yes, it does bog it down a little bit at times, but I enjoy every moment between these characters and them just interacting with each other. I mean, Chris Evans as Human Torch is just great. To me, is the personification of that role, and he's such a dick and just doesn't take anything seriously throughout the entire movie. I love how this Human Torch is just basically roasting Ben Grimm the entire runtime. It is just him making fun of Ben for an hour and a half, and it's great. It's great. And I think once you take a step back and look at all of these characters interacting with each other, I think what they really nail is this family aspect. And that is the core thing that you look for when you go watch a Fantastic Four movie, is the family aspect. They are Marvel's first family. So really they have to nail that aspect of the comics and these characters. And I think they do that with this iteration. I mean, we have Sue Storm and Mr. Fantastic. They're trying to build on this relationship that they used to have, and they're the romantic part of the movie for sure. But then we have Ben Grimm and Human Torch, and they're just ribbing on each other like brothers for the entire movie. And then obviously the brother and the sister, that's probably not the most explored aspect of the four characters. I think that was probably the least explored in my opinion. But like Human Torch versus Mr. Fantastic, it seems like a father figure to a son or something along those lines, and I think they explored that in a unique way that was enjoyable to watch. So I think if you had to say, well, what was the relationship that probably suffered the most? Well, it was probably the two legit brother and sister of the team, Sue Storm and Human Torch. I would probably like a little bit more from them. But with all that being said, I was very pleased with this iteration of these characters. Now, there's one character that we do have to talk about with not only this movie, but we'll discuss it with the next one for sure. And that is Julian McMahon as Victor Von Doom, aka Dr. Doom. He should be one of the most formidable supervillains in all of Marvel. And with this movie, it didn't feel like he was formidable. It felt like he was just a run-of-the-mill monster of the week type of villain. And I mean, get it. He's just shocking people, and he's doing his best Emperor Palpatine with the fucking lightning and shit. I don't think this is a good iteration of the character. I don't like the utilization of his powers here. They feel very bland, and his character overall was just not somebody that I could get behind as a super villain. It just felt very weak to me. Now, Julian McMahon I thought he does a good job very beginning of the movie, but once he starts turning heel and becoming Doctor Doom, it's almost like he becomes a caricature, and he is just this comedic beat for the rest of the movie, and I just don't really like that. Which, by the way, 90% of this movie is punny. There are so many puns here that I do not remember. It's not even punny in a way that like Batman and Robin was, where Mr. Freeze is throwing out ice puns every 5 seconds, and it's just like classic lines that he's dropping. Dr. Doom in his dialogue is just absolutely atrocious. From the, like I said, from the moment he becomes Doctor Doom or starts turning into it's just like they didn't know how to write him, so they just gave him some of the worst dialogue, period. If Chat GPT was a thing back then, I would absolutely die on the hill that this was all AI created, because this dialogue is just abysmal in comparison to everything else in the movie. But it's not just him. A lot of the characters are just super punny. Back then in 2005, we didn't accept movies like this because, like I said, superhero movies weren't really a huge thing at this point. They were just starting to get going. And you had a hard time explaining a dude that turns into rock after going to space. Like, that was just something that people just could not get behind. So like there's like one moment in the movie where Ben is talking to one of the reporters, and the reporter's like, "What do you call that thing?" And Johnny Storm's like, "That's it, the thing." It's stupid things like that throughout the course of the movie that it's just how they insert their names into the dialogue and kind of help speed along the process, if I may. Now, Johnny Storm is like the main culprit in all this. That just fits his character with this iteration, where he is just super wisecrack. He's just dropping one-liners. And that is a product of like the late 90s, early 2000s. It is just the wisecracks and stuff like that. Like the, "Oh my God, you're burning up." And he's like, "Yeah, you're hot too." It does add a little bit of funness to the movie for sure that I really do appreciate, but also on the side that I think they probably took it a little too far, because it just feels like it was just all ad-libbed. But it doesn't feel smart or like funny in a way. It's just like moments of levity, I guess you could say, that just kind of keep you invested in these characters. So I'm only going to sit here and say that the puns and the wisecracks are 10 out of 10s because they're not. Most of the time, they're kind of cringe and eye-rolling, but it fits the movie. It fits the vibe of not only the early 2000s, but this movie in particular. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is the overall story, which there's not really a story here. They meet up, they decide to go to space, and the thing goes wrong. They come back and they have powers. They try to adjust to life with powers while also staying quarantined and trying not to go out. And then they become famous, and then Doctor loses everything, and then he gets pissed off at them and they fight. That is the basic premise of the 2005 storyline. So there's not much to write home about in terms of the story, the plot. So this is strictly just interactions between the Fantastic Four. They have the one big set piece on the Brooklyn Bridge where they actually become heroes and famous, but then you have the ending, and that's really it. Everything else is just them conversing with each other. So there's not a whole lot of depth to this plot and this story. It's really just these characters talking back and forth and kind of throwing out wisecracks every once in a while. But despite all that, I think it's a decent movie. I don't think it's a particularly well-made film. In fact, I think if I had to give it a star rating, I'd probably give it a 2. Not one that I watch every single year. This is one that I probably didn't watch for 15 plus years up until maybe a couple years ago. And I really enjoyed it with that long of a break. So this is not a every other year kind of venture for me. This is something that maybe like 5-10 years from now, hey, let's watch the old Fantastic Four movies. It's that type of movie. It's not good, but it's also not bad. It's just one of those movies that you can pop in and just waste an hour and a half of your life. Which, by the way, the pacing of I'll get into that with Rise of the Silver Surfer, but the 2005 movie, the pacing is pretty good. It kind of just breezes by. I think the runtime of an hour and 45 minutes is in its benefit. I think if it was any bit longer, this movie would have dragged on for sure. In fact, I think you probably could have cut 5 to 10 minutes of this and just let me get in, get out kind of thing. But guys, let me know down in the comments below how you feel about the 2005 Fantastic Four movie. Where does it rank in your like tier list of Marvel movies, especially back in the day? Is this like a bottom tier? Or is it a middle tier? If you say it is top tier Marvel, we're going to have a discussion, okay? Because there's no fucking way. But to each their own. But while you're down there, hit that like and subscribe button. Really helps us out. And with that being said, I'll catch you in a few days when I review Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer. And then I'll hit up Fan 4 Stick right before the brand new Fantastic Four movie comes out on the 24th. So be on the lookout for that. Hit the notification bell. And with all that being said, I appreciate y'all joining me, and I'll catch y'all next time on the next episode. Laters.